Thomas Sowell, Applied Economics, Thinking Beyond Stage 1. Dive into the world of applied economics as Thomas Sowell's book, Applied Economics, Thinking Beyond Stage 1, highlights the importance of recognizing the real-world consequences of economic policies, both short and long-term. Through examples in the realms of healthcare, labor, housing, and much more, this book showcases the differences between political logic and economic logic, emphasizing the need to understand the incentives and constraints created by policies. Get ready to explore the economic implications behind decisions regularly made by politicians and learn how to see past stage 1 in order to anticipate the potentially harmful effects on the economy and society as a whole.
Applying economic logic. The book highlights the difference between economic logic and political logic and how it affects policy decisions. While people may know basic economic facts, they often advocate policies that make no sense in the face of economic reality. This is because political logic operates on emotion and hope, while economic logic works on incentives and constraints. The author explains that every policy decision has consequences that can take years to surface. Economic consequences are often overlooked, so politicians advocate policies that may negatively impact their constituents in the long run. The pitfalls of political pandering. This book highlights how politicians often worsen economic problems by offering quick-fix solutions to gain votes. This is a widespread problem, as politicians in developing countries offer subsidized goods and services to gain favor with voters, but this often leads to fiscal crises and economic hardships. However, developed countries are not immune to this issue, as shown by California's politicians regulating electricity prices to appease voters without addressing underlying costs in the energy sector. As a result, utilities were forced to pay more for electricity than they could sell it for, leading to blackouts, bankruptcies, and an unreliable power grid. The book underscores how politicians must prioritize implementing sustainable solutions over pandering for votes to avoid exacerbating issues facing their constituents. Economic logic in politics. Economic logic goes well beyond political stage 1 and can accurately predict the outcome of policies. In his book, the author delves into how economic logic operates in the world of politics beyond the initial stages of policy development. According to the author, politicians often make mistakes in assessing a problem's existence and severity. In a free market system, people have the ability to determine a problem's seriousness and pay for the most sensible solution based on the price and gravity of the problem. The author suggests that California's energy crisis could have been solved if economic logic had been applied. A hands-off approach to the price system, allowing prices to increase, may have resulted in Californians adopting conservation measures or leading to the construction of new power plants. However, the price system was politically distorted and became a significant issue instead of a minor inconvenience. The author proposes using economic logic to predict the future outcome of policies. By thinking in economic terms, one can easily make out the potential effects of policies. The book offers several examples that prove the economic logic principle's credibility. In summary, the book suggests avoiding political distortions and applying economic logic to predict future outcomes of policies. Slavery's economic impact. Slavery was a poor foundation for economic systems due to the undeveloped human capital and lack of incentive for productivity. Although slavery is no longer common, minimum wage laws can also hinder valuable training and opportunities for unskilled workers. The free movement of labor benefits workers and the economy as a whole. Right to healthcare. Governments worldwide provide a subsidized right to good medical care. However, there are consequences. Subsidies and price controls lead to increased demand, but less supply, resulting in rising prices. This results in lower quality care for health consumers who have no alternatives, leading to a parallel market for healthcare. In some countries, consumers pay extra for qualified doctors. The cost of medical care can also be distorted by factors like the tort system in the US, where exorbitant malpractice verdicts have driven up costs and driven providers away from some areas. The consequences of these issues can be dire, with stories of pregnant women unable to find obstetricians in some areas making headlines. It is essential to consider all the aspects before answering the question, does everyone have a right to good medical care? The dark side of political meddling in the housing market. Politicians meddling in the housing market has distorted the housing market in many ways, often with deleterious results. Political initiatives such as slum clearance, rent control, and land use restrictions have all contributed to housing shortages, exorbitant rents, and homelessness. While slum clearance made cities more attractive, immigrants and their relatives paid the price as they could not afford the increased cost of housing. Rent control, often thought of as a way to protect the poor from unaffordable housing, has benefited only the poor who initially occupied the rent-controlled housing. This artificially lowers the rental price, resulting in housing shortages and homelessness. Similarly, land use restrictions such as limiting apartment buildings' height and zoning restrictions preventing housing construction have resulted in higher prices for fewer housing units. Such political meddling has adversely affected the housing market, making it unaffordable and unattainable for many. The rationality of risk assessment. Discrimination charges in financial institutions or stores that impose higher prices in particular neighborhoods are not always a result of racial bias, but a rational economic response to the risks of doing business in those areas. Attempts to distort prices or lending practices negatively impact businesses' ability to make accurate risk assessments. The distortion of risk assessment also fuels the growth of public interest law, resulting in lawyers distorting the truth to advance their clients' causes. The author argues that assessing risk is crucial in any policy decision, from nuclear power to auto safety concerns. Any policy proposal should undergo a ruthless economic examination to determine its actual consequences in the long run. The absence of such assessments could lead to unintended yet predictable outcomes, such as more high-risk drivers on the road due to lower auto insurance rates.
In Applied Economics, Thinking Beyond Stage 1, Thomas Sowell highlights the need to assess the long-term consequences of economic policies and their real-world impact, rather than simply focusing on their short-term, Stage 1 goals. He demonstrates how political interventions, such as price control or subsidized healthcare, often lead to negative consequences on the economy and society. By embracing the principles of economic logic instead of political emotion, it becomes possible to foresee the potential dangers behind these policies and advocate for alternatives that foster a more efficient and sustainable economic environment. Sowell's insights urge readers to think critically about the true implications of economic policies and challenge political decisions from an informed perspective.